Alrighty guys, ladies and gentlemen, alright, welcome back on the Read the Bible with Me series. Alright, we're on the book of Exodus still. We're on chapters 17 and we'll do 18 today as well. Alright, we're going to read. Alright, I'm reading from the NIV translation. Alright, and we're just going to be breaking down some of the verses. Alright, without further ado, grab your Bibles, follow along. Alright, as I said, I'm from the NIV version translation. If you don't have a Bible, I'll read out all the verses anyway, so no worries. Before we open up, we'll start with a quick prayer. Alright. Father, I pray as we read your word that you sanctify us and bless us by your truth. Your word is truth. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Alrighty. Book of Exodus, chapter 17, verse 1. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" Right, so Israel, we see that they're sort of moving by stages, right? And they camp at Rephidim and there's no water. Right, and we know what happens when the people don't have something, right? We see that they don't just ask, right? It says they quarrel, right? Give us water to drink, right? They don't ask, "Oh, is there any water we can drink?" No, it's give us water to drink, right? And Moses answers, right, with the real issue, with the facts, right? Why do you quarrel with me, right? Why do you test the Lord, right? And I guess the question the passage forces is, did God know that there'd be no water there? Right, and the answer is yes, he knew. So why did he lead them there? Because, again, God is training them, right? And we still say that today, right? God sometimes, leads us into places where, we feel we lack something, right? Not because he forgot to put it there, right? But because he's simply building us, right? He's building something in us, which is to trust under pressure, right? We've been reading, we've often seen, right? People, they're all worshipping, right? They're all proud to worship when a miracle happens, but when they're down in the dumps, when it comes to Monday morning, right? Do they trust when you're under pressure, right? And that's what God is training these people to do, and he does the same today. Verse 3. But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." Right? They say the same, line we've been seeing, again. Why did you bring us out of Egypt, right, just to kill us? Right? This isn't just an act of frustration, right? This is accusing God's character, right? And Moses is, very honest here, right? What shall I do with these people, right? They're pretty much ready to kill me. They're ready to stone me. Right, and that's the reality of being a leader, right? When people are stressed, who do they often aim their anger at, right? Whatever is closest to them, right? God's not physically closest to them, so they grab a hold of Moses instead, right? And that's still true today, right? Whether it's your families, whether it's in your workplace, right? Even churches, right? Pressure often reveals people's true heart and where people, get to blame things, where they put the blame. Verse 5. The Lord answered Moses, "Go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand with the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Right, so God tells Moses, he says, take some elders, right, as witnesses, right? He says, take the staff, right? We've seen the staff is a symbol of God's authority, right? And he says, strike the rock and water will come out of that rock, right? Moses names the place, right, Massah, right, which means testing, and Meribah, which means quarreling, right? And the key line is the question Israel asks, right? Is the Lord among us or not? Right, and that question is still one of the most common, modern faith crisis that we see today, right? Does God exist? So not, believers don't question if God exists, but they question is he with me, right now, right? In this, especially through tough periods, right? And again, under pressure, right? You got to believe that God is witnessing all of this, and in fact, he's building and training you, right? So to question the Lord, is he with me right now, is just stupid. Because if you truly believe and have faith in him, you know that he's omnipresent, he's always with you, he's always there, right? But through tough periods, he's training and testing you, right? And if you ask, oh, is he with me, if you question him, right, that's a sign of you're failing, all right? And I guess in this passage, when they ask, right, is he with me right now? The answer is yes, he was there, right? And he's going to provide with water from the rock, even though they did not deserve it as well, right? Verse 8. The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I'll stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. Right, so right after provision, right, we see conflict. Right, Amalek came and fought with Israel. Right, and we see Joshua introduced for the first time. Right, and Moses takes the hill with the staff. Right, and we get sort of a strange but powerful scene. Right, whenever Moses' hands are up, right, Israel prevails. But whenever his hands are dropped, right, Amalek starts to win over Israel. So what Aaron and Hur does, right, they support him by lifting his arms, right, one on one side, one on the other, right, until sunset comes down. Right, and this is you can sort of see this as like imagery, right? They sustained victory, right, through sustaining support, right, through them holding their hands up, right? Often people love, big moment faith, right? But the real fight is endurance, right? After that big moment is done, can you endure and keep having faith in the Lord, right? And endurance often requires the community around you, right? A lot of people, they lose battles, right, they could have won simply because they tried to, hold the weight by themselves and alone. Or even so, they have a bad community around them, and that the process is even quicker of losing faith in the Lord. Verse 14. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it, because I'll completely blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Moses built an altar and called it, the Lord is my banner. He said, because hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. Alright, so God says, write this and recite it to Joshua. Right? This is because Joshua will lead later. Right? God is, again, he's thinking ahead. He's shaping the future generation, the next generation. Right? Moses built an altar and calls it, the Lord is my banner. Right? Which means the victory wasn't won by skill, strength, or numbers. Right? It was the Lord over them that won them that victory, won them that battle. And that matters today because we live in a culture that trains to, credit ourselves only, right? When we, win over something, right? But what Scripture does is it brings back that attention back to God. It humbles us, right? You didn't win that fight. God did it because He's looking over you. All right, we're on chapter 18 now. All right, verse 1. Now Jethro, the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses, heard everything God had done for Moses and for his people Israel, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. After Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her and her 2 sons. One son was named Gershom, for Moses said, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. And the others was named Eliezer, for he said, my father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness, where he was camped near the mountain of God. Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you, so with your wife and her 2 sons. Alright, so Jethro, who's Moses' father-in-law, hears what God has done and brings Zipporah and also Moses' sons. Right, it's a small detail, right, but it's real life, right? Ministry and calling doesn't, just erase the responsibilities you have, right? In this case, Moses with his family still has family responsibilities, right? And God often reintegrates, right, what got separated during crisis season, right? When you're going through a crisis, things often separate, right? But God will always bring them back to you, right? You won't lose them forever in a crisis. Verse 7. So Moses went out to meet with his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. They greeted each other and then went into the tent. Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships they had met along the way, and how the Lord had saved them. Jethro was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hand of the Egyptians. He said, Praise be to the Lord, who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods, for he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. So Moses recites and tells the whole story, right? And Jethro rejoices and says, now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, right? So even at minimum, Jethro is acknowledging, Yahweh's supremacy, right? Then they worship and share a meal, and it says, before God, right? Whether or not Jethro fully understands everything yet, the clear thing here is that your testimony matters, right? It moves someone from the outside to honor God, right? Moses' testimony moves Jethro to honor God. Simple as that. And that's still true today, right? A real story of God's faithfulness can crack open a heart that's so hardened, right? Faster than arguments will. I saw this thing and I loved it. It was like, you're the 5th gospel, right? Your testimony, your story is often the 5th gospel, because that's the first maybe gospel a non-believer will see is you and your testimony. So you got to make sure that your story and your gospel is good, right? Like the other gospels, and ready, if that person wants to turn themselves into Christ, they're often the first gospel they read is yourself. Verse 13. The next day Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood him around him from morning till evening. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as a judge while all these people stand around you from morning till evening? Moses answered him, Because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions. Moses' father-in-law replied, What you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Right? This is sort of the turning point, right? Moses sat to judge people from morning till evening. And Jethro basically says, right, this will destroy you. Right? You and the people will wear yourselves out. Right? It's too heavy for you. And that's one of the clearest, right, anti-burnout passages in the Bible. Right? And it's not subtle. Right? And I guess connection with C is a lot of people think being needed, right, equals being faithful. Right? And sometimes being needed just means that, the certain system is unhealthy, right? And Jethro calls it what it is, right? It's not good. He says it plain and simple. He doesn't sugarcoat it. Verse 19. Listen now to me, and I'll give you some advice. And may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them his decrees and instructions, and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. That will make your load lighter, because they will share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. Right, so Jethro's wisdom is, structured. Right, Moses stays as a main representative before God. Right, Moses teaches the people, the statutes and the way. Right, Moses appoints qualified leaders. Right, fear God, trustworthy and hate bribes. Right, leaders handle small matters. Right, and the hard cases go straight to Moses. Right, and the result is that Moses is able to endure. Right, the people get peace, and the justice becomes, very easily scalable. Right, and this is showing, maturity in leadership. Right, systems that serve people, right, without crushing, the leader in Moses. Right, and yes, it still applies today. Right, anywhere where people lead, whether it's in a church, right, a business, right, in your family, if everything depends on one person, that's not spiritual. It's very fragile. All right, verse 24. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. He chose capable men from all Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. Then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country. Right, so notice that Moses doesn't get defensive that someone's, telling him to do something, right? He implements it, right? That's showing humility, right? If he didn't have humility, he'd be like, who are you to tell me something? I'm Moses. I'm God's chosen one, right? And it's worth nothing, right? A wise counsel can come, through unexpected people, right? Moses doesn't reject it because, it's simply not his idea, right? He recognizes, wisdom, right? What he's being told by Jethro is wisdom, right? And he moves and he acts on it. All right, we're going to end it there on chapter 18. All right. We did chapter 18, we did chapter 17 and 18 today. All right, next video we'll go through 19 and 20, which is the 10 commandments at the time. Thank you if you've watched this far, listened to this far. Really appreciate it. May God bless you, protect you all, keep you safe. Hope you have a good rest of your day, week, weekend. All right, see you in the next one.